when you gave your opinion, not this year, last year, you agreed when you were assessing the wound, you used the word or adopted the word possibly, didn't you?
Explain the context of it?
Sure.
That sentence?
Sure. Go right ahead.
No, you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Please rephrase the question.
When you were asked about your opinion last year, not this year, last year, about whether to a reasonable degree of medical certainty the injuries were from an animal attack, possibly a large dog, you agreed with that characterization. A large animal, possibly a dog, didn't you?
Yes, an animal, possibly a large dog, last year, yes.
When you were on direct examination, there were tons of questions about this word methodology. Do you remember all those questions you were asked?
In June?
Yesterday.
Yesterday, okay, yes.
Yes. And when you were asked about methodology, was that an attempt to try to explain that you weren't just looking at an abrasion and guessing or eyeballing it? You were trying to suggest there was some type of scientific or medical process to give some type of certainty to your opinion?
That is the process I used.
When you talked about methodology yesterday, you talked about your experience in methodology with knife wounds and gunshot wounds, correct?
Yes.
But there was no methodology whatsoever regarding looking at a photograph and then identifying whether that is consistent with dog bites, is there?
I disagree.
When you described methodology, you were asked by Attorney Alessi whether or not you've engaged in that methodology regarding dog bites. Did you agree that there is really no methodology regarding dog bites?
I disagree.
When you use the word methodology regarding dog bites, there isn't something specific you're looking at as if you were looking at a fingerprint. There are points of comparison. You don't do that, do you?
There are no specific points that are published by a organization, for instance, on how to determine something is a dog bite. However, I did use different methodologies, including what we talked about: the differential diagnosis, the pattern recognition. Pattern recognition, again, is so important in medicine. It's what pathologists use to diagnose tumors.
There is no standard. There is no recognized standard anywhere for methodology on how to identify a dog bite wound, is there?
There is no published standard from an organization that I am aware of.
So there is no source, there is no recognized community, there's no certification, there is no recognized method in identifying a superficial abrasion as a dog bite. Isn't that fair to say?
As in many conditions in the medical field, there are no certifications.
How about published standards? Is there any published standards whatsoever, any, regarding claims that a superficial abrasion is a dog bite? Are there any published standards by any organization?
No, but there would have to be thousands of published standards to identify the causes of the thousands of different types of abrasions. So, no, there's no published standards.
No published standards. There is nowhere you can point to where the so-called methodology that you were telling the jury yesterday is a readily accepted standard in the dog bite community. You can't point to anywhere, can you?
There are peer-reviewed articles which list recommendations on how to determine something is from some wounds are from a dog. These are peer-reviewed articles written by esteemed physicians that have analyzed dog bites and have published these and have published an approach to identifying, particularly a forensic approach to identifying dog bites.
Let me ask you the question again, Dr. Russell. Can you point to one place where there is a readily accepted standard in the dog bite community for identifying dog bites? One article, one journal, one book. Can you point to any?
Well, I'm going to mention the articles I mentioned earlier. The article with the lead author of Dr. Demunick and the article with the lead author of Dr. Pollack. And although they're not standards, they are recommendations.
I'm going to ask you the question one more time before I approach. Can you point to one place, where there is a readily accepted standard in the dog bite community for identifying dog bites?
No.
And so with no readily accepted standards in the dog bite community, no defined methodology, when you look at a photo like you do of John O'Keefe's arm, you're just eyeballing it based on your personal experience with dog bites rather than relying on some type of scientific foundation that has been published and accepted in the community.
Objection, Your Honor. I'm going to allow that.
Isn't that fair to say, Dr. Russell?
No, absolutely not. There are many, many conditions in medicine where there are no standards developed, and yet doctors make, and nurse practitioners and the like, make diagnoses all the time on these various medical conditions, and more importantly, they treat them because they require treatment. There are not published standards on every single of the 10,000 or more medical conditions that exist, including dog bites.
I'm not talking about a stuffy nose or a broken leg. We're talking about dog bites here. So let's focus on dog bites if you would, if you can indulge me, doctor. Regarding dog bites, since there is no standard practice, there is no accepted methodology, and since there is no accepted and approved guidelines, you are essentially simply looking at a picture, a photograph, and just using your past experience with treating dog bites as the basis for your opinion. Isn't that fair to say?
I don't think so. I'm using my past experience, my strong interest in dog bites over 30 years, and the and the articles that I read. The numerous articles I read, but the articles that have recommendations. I'm using all of that combined to come up with a methodology for determining that those are the result of a dog.
When you say coming up with a methodology, are you saying that you're creating your own methodology, that you're the person who has the standard and nobody else? Is that your position, Dr. Russell?
No, the phrasing was not good there. I use standard methodology of pattern recognition and differential diagnosis.
There is no standard in the medical community relative to differential diagnosis and pattern recognition as it relates to dog bites, not other areas of medicine, dog bites. There is no accepted methodology, is there?
That's true.
You mentioned that you have this strong interest in dog bites. Let me borrow a phrase. Do you think you had any confirmation bias when you got into this case?
I don't think so.
Well, you definitely wanted to be in this case. You weren't sought out. You sought the case.
That is incorrect.
And you said you had a strong interest in dogs, and that is one of the reasons you wanted to get involved in this case. Isn't that fair to say?
No, that's actually an unfair statement. I did not want to get involved. I wanted to offer my my knowledge and experience to help clarify issues. I did not want to become an expert witness in this case, and I used, again, as I do on just about every medical condition that I look at and every wound that I look at, I do a differential diagnosis. What else could this be? What else could have caused these scratches and abrasions and wounds? What else before I come to my conclusion?
On your ride over here today, were you instructed that when I ask a question, rather than answer it, give a long explanation about something else?
No.
I would like to put up an exhibit of Mr. O'Keefe's arm, and I want to ask you some questions about it. You and I have had many conversations about Mr. O'Keefe's superficial scratches before, haven't we?
Yes.
And would you agree, looking at these, they are superficial abrasions? Do you agree with that characterization?
Yes.
When we last spoke, just for background, to remind ourselves, we broke these into separate parts so we could discuss them by number, just for the sense of clarity. And we discussed this as wound number 1. Do you remember that?
Grouping number 1, yes.
Number 2?
Yes.
Number 3?
Yes.
4?
Yes.
5?
Which did you call
sorry, this
4?
one.
4,
5.
5, 6, maybe.
Okay. So as we go through, I'm going to identify them by number. That wasn't done by anybody else. It was just during our discussion so we can have clarity. Is that fair?
Okay.
Sustained.
Is it fair if I refer to this as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6?
I think so.
Okay. When you testified on June 18th of 2024, last year, when you came in, you were asked questions before the actual hearing. You were asked questions about this particular superficial abrasion, weren't you?
I'd have to see the transcript. I believe
course.
so, but I'd have to see the transcript.
Do you remember when you were first giving opinion testimony about this specific abrasion, wound number 1? Do you remember you saying that you thought it was either teeth or nails?
I'd have to see the transcript again.
I will give you the transcript, and as I'm doing that, let me ask you, do you remember your testimony about what you actually said?
Yes, Your Honor.
So, do you remember your testimony?
For each specific day, no. I remember generally, but not for each specific day.
If you
I've
have
been
an
here many
opinion-
times.
I'm going to bring your transcript up to remind you, but if you have an opinion, it shouldn't change, right? It should always be the same?
Generally, yes.
Okay. So let me ask you before we talk about what you said at the beginning. What is this from? Teeth or nails?
It could be either, but I think that's from teeth.
So when you say they could be either, if you have a methodology and you have a certain standard where you can identify something based on a standard, there wouldn't be so much uncertainty, would there? You'd be able to look at this, consider the methodology, and either come to an opinion whether it was teeth, nails, or something totally different, right?
You know, Mr. Brennan, perhaps I didn't explain earlier, but the nail of a dog tends to be cone-shaped, conical in shape, and very similar to the nails that the canine teeth of dogs. So the shape and the fact that they come to a point makes some wounds indistinguishable.
Are you saying that nails of a dog are so similar to the teeth that you can't tell the difference between them when you're looking at a wound?
I'm saying that they can cause similar-looking abrasions.
Are you able, as the premier expert in the United States on dog bites, able to tell the difference between teeth and claw nails of an animal when you're looking at a wound?
Individually, well, okay, that's a very interesting question. Sometimes it's difficult because they can have similar appearing wounds. So you have to look at the overall pattern in order to make some conclusions.
Well, when you first started testifying in this case, you never suggested you had to look at everything in totality. You were giving opinions regarding individual wounds. Isn't that fair to say?
No.
It wasn't until I began asking you questions and you had inconsistent answers that you've now changed from, rather than identifying individual wounds, now you're saying I can't identify individual wounds, but I can tell you in totality.
I disagree with that. I believe that the very first time I testified, I mentioned that the overall pattern was important.